This might be my most successful week to date on the Read What You Own challenge. Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and this is the fourth week of the fourth annual Read What You Own challenge. This challenge was created by the evil mastermind Criminali. I will provide a link in the description of this video if you do not already know the history of this event or the rules that I am abiding by for my personal challenge. Everyone's challenge is a little bit different, and everyone has their own rules. I will be doing the top platinum tier, where I'm going to be reading 25,000 pages of books that I already own before buying another book. The first book I finished this week was on my Kindle, The Secret Lovers by Charles McCarry, 310 pages long. This is the third novel in his Paul Christopher series. It is essentially an espionage series. You can think Le Carré's George Smiley series or Ian Fleming's James Bond series. Although Paul Christopher is not like George Smiley, and he is not like James Bond. He is his own spy character. He's a lot more tight-lipped, a lot more introspective. It's a lot harder to know the character of Paul Christopher. He's a quiet man. At one point in this book, his wife has extramarital affairs just to see if she can rise a reaction out of him. And he doesn't react. So if you want to learn more about that, you will have to read this book. It does work pretty well as a standalone book. I read the first in the series a number of years ago. But this story is the second in the chronological line of the Paul Christopher story, and it starts out in Berlin. And Paul Christopher is meeting a secret agent, and this agent is going to be delivering him a top secret manuscript. And the agent delivers it to Paul Christopher, and then he goes on his own way and is immediately run over by a car, quite deliberately. It becomes clear to Paul Christopher that this secret meeting was not too secret. So he has to find out who blew the cover and got his agent murdered. And then you learn about the secret document that was delivered. It is a Russian novel. In this story, it's going to be the best novel of the 20th century. And he has to find out how he can publish it without getting the Russian author killed, because the author is behind the Iron Wall in the Soviet Union, and they are not going to be too pleased when this book is published. I liked this book a lot. It is a very good espionage book and a mystery book because, as the story goes along, Paul Christopher knows the person who blew the cover. That's just the way mysteries work. So can the reader keep ahead of the writer and find out who did it? Read it for yourself and find out. I have also been participating in Chekhovember. This is a Voxer group where we are reading the works of Anton Chekhov. The first 2 weeks were devoted to 2 of his plays, and I have to admit, I did not get along with his plays. But then we moved on to his short stories, and the week before this one, we read Ward 6, which I liked a lot more. And this week, we read 2 of his shorter stories. One was Gooseberries, 12 pages long, and The Lady with the Little Dog, which was 16 pages long. In Gooseberries, a Russian aristocrat basically has a gooseberry farm, and he is going to live his ideal life out in the countryside. But his ideal life may not be as ideal to everyone else. But the story that I liked even better was The Lady with the Little Dog. There is a Russian gentleman. He's out in the countryside having a holiday. He did not bring his wife because he is a bit of a ladies' man. He likes to have fun with the ladies, and a lady captures his attention. Her name, I believe, is Anna, and she has a little toy dog. And he starts off what he thinks is going to be another mindless fling, but it turns out that this is going to be his true love of his life. And the story ends on sort of a very bitter note. Most people in the Chekhov Ember group really liked this story, and so did I. I know I read this when I was at university, but it was still fresh to me because that was an awfully long time ago when I originally read this story. I am going to continue eventually with more of Chekhov's stories because they're pretty good. I think I'm going to leave his plays alone. Next on my Kindle, I read a short horror novella. It was No One Rides for Free by Judith Sonnet, 108 pages long. This is listed as extreme horror. The author does give a rather strong trigger warning about how graphic this story is going to be. And yes, it does get really gross and graphic. Now, the thing with extreme horror is sometimes it can be very effective. Sometimes it's just the author creating scenarios and stories just to get as gross and as gruesome and as visceral as possible. This is what happened with No One Rides for Free. It starts off with a woman probably in her earlier mid-40s. She is delivering her 2 children to a college, and her husband had died a number of years ago. And she is quite happy to be sending her children off to college because that means she can explore her sexual appetites. And she does like her meaningless romantic liaisons. And I use romantic in a euphemistic way. She just wants sex. So she's driving out in New Mexico, and she stops at a small convenience store to buy supplies. She flirts with a younger man behind the counter, and she basically agrees to meet up with him in a day or two after her children are dropped off. But when she gets back to her car, there is a stranger in the car holding her children hostage. And what this man does to her children, and another elderly woman they pick up is rather grotesque. And the book is really rather ineffectual. It is one of those cases where the author is just splattering every piece of blood and body part that she can think of. Really not very entertaining, and just sort of mindless gore. I do sometimes like the extreme horror genre, but not in this case. The author also wrote in her afterwards that she had challenged herself to write this book completely within 10 days. That speed at which she wrote it and the lack of a coherent storyline and character development really shines through. I really cannot recommend this book. Skip it. This is Teddy. He is about 8 years old. I found him 7 years ago when I was living in Washington State outside of the city Tacoma. He just showed up on my doorstep. So I took him to the vet to see if he had a microchip, and the vet said no microchip. He was about 1 year old and unneutered. So then I called up the animal shelter, and the animal shelter said, "We don't have any space for new cats. You can take care of him for about a month or two, and when we get space, we'll give you a call, and we'll take him in. So I decided I was going to do that, but I said, well, let's just get him neutered. I don't mind paying for a little neutering operation. It would save the state a little bit of money. So I got him neutered. I brought him inside and took care of him. 2 months later, the shelter said, we have space. We can take your stray cat. And I said, he's no longer a stray cat. He has a home. And this is his harness. Teddy, as a former stray cat, really likes to go outside, and I don't want him wandering around on his own. So I have to stick a leash on him and walk him. I have a number of videos showing him walking on his leash. He's my good boy. The next book I finished was an audiobook. Ian Fleming, The Complete Man by Nicolas Shakespeare. 707 pages long in the print edition. And this is the kind of book that Mark at Book Time with Elvis would call a corker, a really fascinating and fantastic biography of Ian Fleming. He is the author of the James Bond novels. And as Nicolas Shakespeare starts off this biography saying, even if Ian Fleming had never written the James Bond novels, he would still be a subject of a biography because he was really rather important to the British intelligence movement in World War II. Quite powerful, and he did some rather remarkable things in his career. One of them was he helped the United States set up their spy networks, and he was well known to Bill Donovan of the OSS. That's the secret agency before the CIA. So as a spy, Ian Fleming was really rather remarkable. And as the biography gets going, you learn that the life of Ian Fleming essentially helped create the character of James Bond. No other author could have created a character like James Bond other than Ian Fleming with his background in espionage and his education and his family. He came from a pretty wealthy family. Ian Fleming liked the luxuries of life. He loved the ladies. He was very popular with the ladies, and he liked his sports cars. But the whole of the biography I just found completely fascinating and engaging. You don't usually get that in a literary biography, but I was totally enwrapped listening to this audiobook. I also have a Kindle version of this book because it was on sale one day for $1.99. And I said, why not own the audio and the Kindle? Towards the end of the book, I was listening to the audiobook while reading the Kindle version. One of the fascinating things about Ian Fleming is that he used the people in his life in his James Bond stories. He did not necessarily take elements of their personal lives or their skills, but occasionally he did. But mostly, he liked to borrow names. I don't remember the exact name, but when he was a young man, probably early 20s, he was dating a Swiss girl. And she brought him back to meet her mother. And the mother's name turned out to be an important character later on in the James Bond series. I'm not too sure how people would feel about that, seeing their name in another character in a novel, but maybe they would be entertained. But in any case, this is one of the best biographies that I have listened to in quite a few years, and I can highly recommend it. Towards the end of the week, I had just finished reading The Secret Lovers, and I needed to pick up a new novel to read. And the biography influenced me, and I picked up Moonraker by Ian Fleming. That is the third of the James Bond novels. It is also rather unique in that series is that it's entirely set in England. James Bond does not go on any foreign adventures. And in this story, M calls up James Bond and makes a personal request. There is a wealthy British businessman named Drax. Drax has cornered the market on this rare metal, and this metal is going to be used in British defense. He's going to build a missile called the Moonraker. But that's not the important part of this story. M says Drax is a member of an exclusive gambling club in London. And Drax is probably cheating at cards for money. Drax is extremely wealthy, and he would not need to cheat at cards for money. So it's up to James Bond to discover if Drax is cheating, and then to decide what to do about it. And yes, Drax is cheating at cards. And it does turn into a rather thrilling espionage novel, because Drax has his own secrets, and you'll have to read the book to find out what they are. I am continuing to read the collected fictions of Jorge Luis Borges. I finished 3 short stories this week: Man on the Pink Corner, 8 pages, etc., 12 pages, and Tlõn, Uqbar, Orbis, Tertius. That was 13 pages. Man on the Pink Corner was an interesting story about a knife fight in a small town in, I presume, Argentina, where a man goes into a taqueria, they call those, tequilerias, I'm not quite sure the pronunciation, and asks another man to have a knife fight. The man he asked is supposed to be one of the best knife fighters, and the best knife fighter just rejects him completely. But does it end there? No, because the story is narrated by another man who, quite naturally, has a knife up his sleeve. The third story is the Tlõn, Uqbar, Orbis, Tertius, is my favorite story of this collection so far, and it really kicks off Borges' masterwork collection, Ficciones. And in this, it postulates, what if people were to write an encyclopedia about a place that did not exist? What if they were right about the language that this place used, and this language itself did not exist? And if this encyclopedia were long enough and detailed enough and complete enough, would this other place suddenly come into existence? That's the kind of thing that Borges does really, really well. And I'm so glad that I'm now over his early short stories. I still liked his early short stories, but now I'm entering to that major phase that I'm going to be completely engaged in these short stories. Okay, that is a wrap for week 4. It comes to a total of 1,508 pages, bringing my challenge total up to 5,049 pages. That means I have completed 20.20% of my challenge. I think I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little ahead of where I want to be, although I do anticipate slowing down or having a slowdown sometime in the future, because those things just sort of happen. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.